been following the conventional advice to build your consulting practice? Network politely, don't be too bold, wait for the right opportunity, keep things professional. What you're about to hear might make you uncomfortable. And that discomfort, that's exactly what's holding you back. In part one of my conversation with Stever Robbins, we learned why being different beats being better and why traditional success advice fails self-employed consultants. Stever shared how embracing his unconventional background, being raised in a hippie commune, became his biggest business differentiator instead of something to hide. But here's where it gets really interesting. What do you do when you create something so authentic, so outside the bounds of what's considered appropriate in business, that it could be reputationally disastrous, but it's also the best work you've ever done? That's the choice Stever faced with his new marketing textbook, and his decision changed everything. I'm AJ Riedel. This is Thriving Through the podcast, where each week I have real conversations with seasoned, successful self employed consultants about what it really takes to build a profitable, sustainable, and fulfilling consulting practice. In part two of this conversation, Stever reveals the pivot that transformed his business, a book based on his adventures at Burning Man that Fortune 500 CEOs read 9 times but won't publicly endorse. More importantly, he shares the hard truth most consultants resist. You're not a consultant who occasionally has to sell. You're a full-time salesperson that occasionally gets to do consulting. If you're uncomfortable with self-promotion, if you give up after 3 follow-ups with prospects, or if you're trying to build a business using only the strategies that feel comfortable rather than the ones that actually work, this episode will challenge you to think differently. We'll also dive into the critical sales metric most consultants get wrong, why 9 touches minimum matters more than having thousands of prospects, and Stever's brutally honest advice. Go be a salesman for someone else before you start consulting. Ready to get uncomfortable? Let's dive right in.
One of the things I just consider somewhat hilarious to this very day is I was on the board of the International Coach Federation of New England for several years back when it was back in the early 2000s. I've never been ICF certified. I I had already had dozens of coaching clients by that point, but that part of my brain that resists things that I've never grown past my teenager years said, look, I am a practicing coach. I have degrees from MIT and Harvard Business School. You know, I I I also, if you've ever heard of neurolinguistic programming, which is a type of cognitive psychology, I'm one of the 18 highest certified people in the world, certified directly by the two founders. So, so when I look at all of that, I say, you know what? I'm just not in the mood to jump through another hoop. Now, it turns out if I were going after a corporate market, which I'm not at this point, but if I were going after a corporate client specifically, there are a lot of corporations that require you to be ICF certified, which in the abstract, I approve of that because in the absence of demonstrated skill, a certification really does say at least this person made it through this program to a certain level of standards. But I chafe against those things myself, even if I know that they serve a useful purpose, whatever. I'm like, yes, but they shouldn't have to apply to me, gosh darn it. I'm like, really, really, I'm actually a grown up at this point. I am a grown up and I'm still thinking that way. And I am also a grown up and I put my head in my hands and I make this gesture and I look at myself and I go, who am I? Where did these genetics come from? I do not understand.
Well, you're not most people, quite clearly. And that, speaking of that, for most of your career, you did try to fit in the traditional business culture.
Oh, yeah.
But now you are embracing your freakness, so to speak, and you are deliberately pivoting into learning what makes you unique. So
Yes.
tell me what prompted this shift and then more.
Okay. Um, I'm going to go there. It's okay if I can
Okay.
go there? All right.
Hmm.
So probably the biggest thing that prompted this shift was a conversation that I had in 2018 at a house party. I was talking to a woman, and I wish I could remember who it was. I remember the image of the scene. It may not have been someone that I knew super well. Like I kind of have the feeling she was a friend. She must have been a friend because I was telling her all about my adventures at Burning Man. And she was laughing hysterically. And she said, "Oh my gosh, you have to write these down." So I wrote them down. And I actually realized during the conversation with her, every one of these adventures corresponded to a marketing concept.
Mm.
And and let me be clear, these were adult adventures. These were not safe for work adventures. And I I had this realization, and I looked at her and I said, "Oh my gosh, I just realized everything I know about marketing I learned from trying to get laid." And she said, "You have to write the article." And I was like, "No, no, no." So I went home and I outlined the article. And it wasn't an article, it was a book. In fact,
Mm.
it was a marketing textbook. I could cover every single concept that they taught me in first year marketing, plus a little bit of operations and strategy. Boom. Uh, through stories of my sexual adventures at Burning Man, or in many cases, my sexual almost adventures and didn't quite work out. So I needed to try something else at Burning Man. And I still didn't think I was ever going to do anything with this. And then COVID hit, and I needed a COVID project to keep my mind active. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and write this book. It's never going to amount to anything. I'm never going to publish it. Well, fast forward, and I ended up with a book, but never planned to publish it, never planned to show it to anyone. But just for kicks, I'm going to show it to a few of my friends. Wow. I had people telling me it was the very best marketing book they had ever read. I had a CEO, a three-time CEO, say that he got two chapters in, canceled all of his meetings for the rest of the day, read it cover to cover, and implemented three new marketing initiatives in his company. And I suddenly was faced with nothing I have ever done in my career has gotten that kind of response for people. I had a very popular podcast. It was a top 10 business podcast for 12 years. So that's pretty popular. But when people heard about it, when I told them about it, they didn't say, "Oh my God, I have to listen to the Get It Done guy." They said, "Oh, that's nice. You talk about personal productivity. Give me the name and I'll listen to it at some point." With this book, I have people calling me up saying, "You told me about this book that you were writing. When is it going to hit the press?" I'm like, "The last time we talked was a year and a half ago." They're like, "I know, and I've been marking it off on my calendar." And I'm like, "I've never done anything that people have marked off on their calendar before." So I had a quandary. I have this book that is absolutely way outside the bounds of anything I've ever done before and anything that would be appropriate for a business context. And it's a really good book. And it does a lot, it conveys a lot of really important important business concepts in a way that people find extraordinarily accessible and understandable. And it could be reputationally disastrous if I publish it. I spent a year thinking about this. And at the end of the year, I said, you know what? I have to lean into this
Mm.
and see where it takes me. Because you know what? Leaning into the Harvard MBA thing has not gotten me the level of success that I wanted because it's just not a match. And this one gives me an excuse to talk about my bizarre upbringing. This one, and the thing is, it is a serious business book. I mean, it's told with humor, it's very racy. But at the end of the day, this will teach you how to put a business model together. This will teach, and let me be clear, okay? This is the secret part of it is it's the story of me going from being an outsider, going from being this hippie kid who walks into Harvard Business School to being someone who is known for my offering and is central to a community in a way that has people coming to me when I'm a good fit. And the fact that it happens to be a sexual adventure, fine, it applies to everything. So, yes, it's a marketing textbook, but what I'm marketing in the book is me. And I mean, this is a book that everyone needs to read because, as per previous discussion, the important part about business is who knows you and who you know. And you want to be the go-to person for whatever your product or service is. And
Yes.
and this book is that story, and you can see step by step what made it happen, and it is 99.97% true. And the 0.03% that isn't true is there was one particular storyline that I had to tie up that was like the amalgamation of three real life different events. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to have to make up an ending that merges the three real life events, because the amount of time that it would take to actually tell the story in the way that is historically accurate would not be doing the reader any service. They'd be like, why is he spending all this time on stuff that doesn't illustrate marketing concepts? And I'm like, well, because I'm committed to tying up the story in an absolutely factually accurate way. No, I've merged three characters into one. You still get the story, but it's not exactly how it happened historically. But other than that, I did have one person read it and tell me that they were using it as a dating manual. And I'm like, that was not the intent. Um, and then I've had several other people read it and say, there's no way I could possibly give you a testimonial for this because my public brand would not allow my name to be associated with a book like this. So I'm thinking of getting their permission to do anti-testimonials, where I have their testimonial of like, oh my gosh, this book was so shocking. I read it cover to cover 9 times just to make sure it was as shocking as I thought it was. Signed, Fortune 500 CEO, would be a true testimonial, but obviously they wouldn't want their real name attached to it. And I have like 5 or 6 of those, which I just thought would be a hoot. Um, so that was how I made the decision. I made the decision because I put something out there that was written by the non-standard, non-traditional side of my personality and my brain. And that was the thing that people wanted. And they wanted that way more than my traditional offering. So what I'm doing now, right, is I'm marrying the two. And I'm saying, my traditional offering, which is what my practice is about, my coaching practice is about helping people become connected and respected, right? Helping them become central to their community because I want them to succeed. And guess what? Hard work isn't the way to do it. It's being known by the right people and being respected by people so that when they need you, they will call. So that's my main business. And I'm like, and I have this book that tells that story, and it tells the story in a way that people really want to read it. So go to marketingforvirgins.com and register to be notified when the book comes out. But that's really the thing that made me suddenly go, you know what? I don't know if this has the potential to be as successful as me going for the gray hair and the square jaw thing. But at this point in my life, I'm much less interested in potential, and I'm much more interested in being able to tell someone about my business and having them say, oh my God, where can I get the book? When can we meet? Because I would rather I would rather meet 10 people a year and have every one of them have that reaction than meet 1,000 people a year and have them be going, oh, you're a McKinsey consultant. Oh, that's so interesting. I've never met one of those before. And I'm just like, no, that is not me. Was that too long a story? But that's the
No, that
truth.
was a
That
good
that was
story. And actually, it brings up something that you said when we in the pre-interview. You said that in the age of Chat GPT, you better have some uniqueness if you're going for the peak of the bell curve.
yeah,
So tell the, how do you advise, I mean, to bring it to the listener of this who is a self-employed consultant,
yeah.
what advice would you give in how to differentiate themselves in the AI era?
Sure. So first of all, you're not going to I mean, you may differentiate yourself by writing style somewhat, but at this point, people read so much, so fast, they skim, etc., that what you really need to differentiate yourself by is your voice, if you're doing writing, and your ideas. Like contrarianism is in, and unfortunately, once everyone starts doing it, then it's going to be impossible to stand out among contrarians. But um, but it's really, there are places where you do fit in and that give you the credibility and that give you a voice in the room. And I'm going to use a dating example because my book. If you decide that you want to meet somebody, you the first question is, where am I going to go? Where can I go to meet someone? I can go to apps. I can go to a country western bar. I can go play bingo. I've never done any of those three except the apps, but those are all possibles. Okay. Those are channels of distribution for you as a consultant. Now, in each one of those channels, there are requirements for entry. If you
Mhm.
want to go to a country western bar, you've got to be dressed like someone who should be at a country western bar. Or people are just going to look at you and go, who's the kid in the tie-dye t-shirt walking into Harvard Business School? So there are certain requirements to go to different distribution channels. If you're walking into a Thinkers 50 conference, which is, thought leaders, come with some good contrarian ideas and some one-line zingers that will get people's attention and make them want to talk to you. So you have to have whatever the criteria for admission is. Once you're in the bar and you spot that person who you want to be dancing with, well, guess what? 20 other people who are also all dressed in cowboy boots and flannel shirts, they also spotted that person. So now the game suddenly flips. You
Mhm.
have to go peak of the bell curve when you're trying to get into the distribution channel. But then once you're in, now you need to distinguish yourself. Now you need to whip off your cowboy hat and be wearing a glowing chandelier with a disco ball built in. Not sure it'll get you the person you want, but it'll make you stand out. You'll get noticed. So if you're a solo practitioner, there are different dimensions along which you can fit in and different dimensions where you can stand out. One way is ideas. You might just give standard ideas. McKinsey makes a lot of money telling people what they want to be told. And I've known a lot of consultants who do that. Great. But in that case, you're not going to stand out based on your ideas. Maybe you'll stand out on your willingness to tell people what they want to be told. I mean, I know people I don't know anyone who's done this exact thing, but I know people who have done things like, auditioned to try to get a gig and then said confidentially, if you give me this gig, I'll do whatever it takes to make you look good.
No.
And that was actually the selling point. And you know what? Got them the job because that was the key that turned the lock, and they couldn't compete based on content because it was all the same content everyone wanted, but they could compete based on the I'm willing to do this in a way that makes you, the person who hired me, look good. So figure out, you can stand out based on things like appearance. Michael Bungay Stanier, who's the author of The Coaching Habit, I think is his book. He's had like 4 or 5 books. He's a fabulous coach. He's written some great books, and he dresses in almost fluorescent colors, and he can have a serious business conversation with anyone. So, and he has salt and pepper hair. He really comes across as simultaneously corporate but also fun and out of the box. So with him, he can fit in based on content, based on corporate speak, based on his particular style of gravitas, and then he can be very playful and noticeable with his personal style. I knew a McKinsey consultant. This really was a McKinsey consultant who would absolutely blend in terms of his dress and his attire. And then, once the grown-ups were out of the room, he could totally play hardcore rock and roll with the best of them and just became everyone's best friend, going so far as to his suit was a suit jacket, and he had like a button down, he knew what the word meant, a button down shirt with that tie, but it was all cut off right below the part where his jacket made a V, and it was like a Grateful Dead t-shirt from there down to the rest of, down to his pants. So he looked, with his jacket buttoned, he looked like a standard McKinsey consultant. And I always just thought that was hilarious, right? And personality was something that he might trade on. But you want to identify on what dimensions can you credibly fit in that will get you into the room, and then once you're in the room, how do you stand out? And those dimensions can be content, they can be your personal style, they can be your writing voice, they can be the types of things you comment on. It can be very powerful to go to a venue where your type of consulting isn't normally featured, and highlight it. Go to a plumber's conference and talk about the 3 strategic mistakes plumbers make when they're running their business. I guarantee you will be the only person at the conference who is talking about the strategy of building plumbing firms. Now, you're going to have to do this in a language that people can understand because they may not have the same corporate background. But but you can walk in and you can have, and by the way, I could be, I may be inappropriately stereotyping plumbers. It might be the plumbers conferences are full of strategic sites, and so I apologize for any implication that plumbers don't think strategically. Um, but find the places where you fit in and the places where you stand out. Trade on the ways that you fit in to get into the room, right? I don't trade on my looks, but I trade on my ideas at conferences, and I trade on my HBS degree when I'm applying for things, because those are my peak of the bell curve, mainstream credibility builders. And then once I'm in the room, I stand out based on my Steverisms and based on things like the colorful background, the phrase traveling new age polyamorous hippie commune. And I also don't wear suits. I've never liked suits. This has got to be for my hippie upbringing. Um, I wear suits maybe once a year, and that was pre-COVID. I don't think I've put one on since then, except for a wedding. Um, so that also sometimes makes me stand out if I'm in a conference where everyone is wearing a suit, and I will wear one depending on the conference, but I kind of make that a bit of my trademark, that I'm that guy. If you're going to look over my shoulder, I want to be talking to the people who see me dressed in a sport jacket and jeans and specifically come up to talk to me because they're wondering, who is this person dressed like that? And I have not worn tie dye and ripped up jeans to a business mixer in many, many, many years, but maybe I should try it because who knows?
Yeah, with your new pivot,
Exactly.
who knows? Absolutely. I have, as we near, unfortunately, the end of the podcast, because this is going to be, I can guarantee it's going to be 2 episodes. I have a couple rapid fire
Happens all the
wrap up
time.
questions
Yeah.
that I like to finish with. What is one book, podcast, or resource that has been invaluable to your consulting practice? And it's probably going to be hard to limit it to one.
I'm going to say Get Clients Now by CJ Hayden.
Okay.
It, yeah. Should I say why or just
Yeah.
recommend that?
No. Why?
It's a book on how to sell your services as a consultant. And what CJ does is she breaks it down by different types of sales and different strengths. And she says, here's 15 different ways you can sell your products and services. Choose the ones that mesh with your strengths.
Hmm.
And I had never, I had, so she's like, if you don't like writing, don't choose writing. If what you like is performing, then choose media, or whatever. Like and it's great because that was the first time I read something. I was like, oh, thank gosh, I can choose the one that I'm good at and comfortable with. I don't have to force myself to do the ones that I'm not good at and I'm not comfortable with. And she also gave me a very, very valuable metric, which is that coming out of engineering, I had no concept of close rates, and I would call somebody 3 times to follow up, and then I would assume they weren't interested. And in one of the chapters of Get Clients Now, CJ was like, when you're on your 19th call to a client, and I was like, you're what? And that was when I started looking into it and realized, oh no, I mean, it's in sales, and there's research on this even,
Hmm.
like like 9 touches minimum. And I was
Yep.
like, really? like like you know and here's the secret: if you have 10 prospects and you touch them each 9 times, you will probably end up with more clients than if you have 1,000 prospects and touch them all only 3 times, because none of them will close after 3 touches, and maybe 20% of them will close after 9. And it's way less work to do 9 touches to 10 people than to do 3 touches to 1,000.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So Get Clients Now by CJ Haig.
Hayden, Hayden.
Okay. And the excellent advice on the touches. What's one piece of advice you wish someone had given you when you started consulting?
Go be a salesperson for someone else for a year before you get into your own practice.
Ah,
I have been in practice for 26 years. And this year, I've been working very, very closely with somebody who's an amazing salesperson. And we've been working closely on something else. And it has turned out that it has become totally obvious from our work together and from me watching him. I'm like, holy cow, I don't have the slightest clue how to sell. And I didn't know that because I still get clients, because again, people will come to me after I have spoken on stage. But imagine if I actually had people skills and sales skills, then maybe lots and lots and lots of people would come to me. So many that I would have to hire a sales team. And then once I had the sales team, they would have to hire sales teams. And then we would need a corporate headquarters and so on and so on and so on. So I would say, your job as a self-employed person, you're a full-time salesperson who occasionally gets to do consulting. And you owe it to yourself to get good at it. And if you cringe when I say that, not a problem. Um, do it anyway. Cringe the whole time. And when you come out the other side, you are going to go, oh my God, I hated that. It was the worst experience of my life. And you will then go on to be able to afford more therapists than anyone else has ever been able to afford, because you will be so successful and you can work through it.
True. Yes. Oh, I hear so many consultants who I don't, I'm not comfortable promoting. I'm not comfortable selling. Like you said, I love that line. You're a salesperson full time and you occasionally get to do consulting. That's
Can,
absolutely true.
can boy, let me see if I can pull. Can I share my screen?
Sure.
All
Let
right.
me give you, all right. Take it away.
All right. This is literally the thing I am currently working on. Is I am a CRM for myself so that I can, you see this thing at the top, outreach sent, meeting scheduled, all those things. So at the end
Hmm.
of the day, I can click on those, and then I have this dashboard that shows me. And right, remember, I'm a geek. This is a tool for me. This shows me what the actual probability is of closing sales based on the amount of outreach that I've done so far. Because it turns out I don't do well without immediate feedback, but sales doesn't give you immediate feedback. It feels like wasted energy if you've made 100 phone calls and you haven't made a sale, except that if I've made 100 phone calls, I should have made a sale by that time. But assuming that I can get a 5% conversion rate, which is this red box, even if I've made 30 calls, there's only about a 30 there's only an 80% chance that I should have made a sale by the end of the 30 calls. And that's assuming I can convert at 5%, which might be high if I'm a new salesperson or if I'm calling a particularly cold list or whatever. So yes, I am literally reinventing the things that professional salespeople do so that I can use it myself. Because after watching this person who's a professional salesperson, going, I am a professional salesperson who occasionally gets to do coaching and consulting, and I am not nearly as rigorous as this guy is. Like, why am I not using Salesforce? And the answer is because it's really difficult to use. And I'm like, okay, well, I can grow my own because I used to be an engineer. Uh, but I'm like, you're a salesperson. Get the tools, do it. If you don't like promoting yourself, call me. I'm expensive, but we'll work together. And believe me, at the end of our work together, you will be comfortable promoting yourself. Because if you're not comfortable promoting yourself, you're going to be like Aesop, my employee,
Yep.
who did the work that held everything together. And I almost recommended he be fired because I didn't know it. You may not like it. You may cringe when you do it. Trust me, after you've done it a couple hundred times, you get used to it. And it just becomes a thing you roll off your tongue like traveling new age polyamorous become you. I had to practice that over and over and over. It took me a long time to get the words in the right order and stuff. Now, I now need to do that with my business proposition too, right? I help people become the go-to person for their product or service among their industry. That's what I do. If you want to do that, you call me.
That is such a well-crafted positioning. Say that again.
I help people become the go-to person, the person of choice for their product or service in their industry.
Very nice. And with
It only
that,
took 400 repetitions to
yes.
teach myself to do it.
Well, I teach in my course, I teach value proposition to positioning, and I'm still nuancing mine. I'm still noodling with it. Talk about, every time I give it, I redo it. So it is constant
Yeah,
iteration.
yeah.
That was a great wrap up. So this is the single most important question that I'm going to ask you right now. How can listeners connect with you if they want to learn more about you and your work and your book?
So my book is going to have its own website at marketingforvirgins.com, and you can go and sign up for the announcement for when the book is published. You can find me at steverrobbins.com, STEVERROBBINS.com. The website uh, we're in the middle of doing a revamp of it, so it's still got a somewhat old positioning, but click on the contact screen or the contact link in the upper right hand corner, and you can subscribe to my newsletter and or get a hold of me directly.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you. This has been absolutely delightful talking with you today. And and for all of you listening, until next time, keep thriving through. Let's talk about what this conversation with Stever really means for your consulting business. First, authenticity isn't optional anymore. Steve spent a year deciding whether to publish a book that could be reputationally disastrous because it was so far outside traditional business norms. But that book, the one that's truly authentic to who he is, got a response unlike anything he's done in 26 years of consulting, including a top 10 business podcast. The work that scares you might be the work that changes everything. Second, you need to reframe your identity. You're not a consultant who occasionally has to sell. You're a full-time salesperson who occasionally gets to do consulting. And if that makes you cringe, do it anyway. Get training, build the systems, practice your positioning 400 times until it rolls off your tongue. Your discomfort with sales is costing you clients and revenue every single day. And third, stop giving up too early. 9 touches minimum, not 3, not 5, 9. It's better to follow up with 10 qualified prospects 9 times each than to reach out to 1,000 prospects 3 times. Most consultants quit right before they might have closed the deal. If you want to connect with Stever, visit steverrobbins.com or sign up for updates about his book at marketingforvirgins.com. Fair warning, it's not your typical business book, and that's exactly the point. I know I've signed up. Thank you for joining me for this 2-part conversation. If it challenged you, made you think differently about your consulting business, or inspired you to finally embrace what makes you different, that's exactly what we're for here. And until next time, keep thriving through.